On today's show, I'm breaking down Nathaniel Lowe's fantastic breakout season, some things that he's done that no other Rangers first baseman has done this millennia, some comparisons to Josh Hamilton, and just what the future holds for the Rangers offensive breakout star of the 2022 season. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Friday, October 14th, heading into the weekend for some very, very fun divisional series baseball. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way that you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Before we get into Nathaniel Lowe's breakout season this year, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, Nathaniel Lowe was the undisputed breakout star offensively for this Rangers team. In his age 26 season, he set career highs in basically almost every offensive category. He was just ridiculously better than he was last year and really solidified himself as one of the key offensive pieces, probably the Rangers' number 3 hole hitter for the foreseeable future, at least the next 3 seasons. This year, he finished the year with 157 games played, 27 home runs, which is a new career high, 26 doubles, which is a new career high, 3 triples, a slash line of 302, 358, and 492, and 851 OPS, which by far led this team. He had a 3.3 baseball reference WAR. He also had a 3.0 Fangraphs WAR. He finished, among Major League Baseball first baseman, he had the 4th highest OPS, top 5 in on-base percentage, and in batting average, 8th in Fangraphs WAR among first basemen, and 9th in baseball reference WAR. He was ahead of guys like Ty France, who was an all-star, Josh Bell, who I thought the Rangers might think about trading for at the trade deadline. Nope, good call, not doing that. And Anthony Rizzo, who absolutely dominated in terms of home runs, and he only finished .1 baseball reference WAR behind Matt Olson, the guy who I thought maybe the Rangers should empty the bank and go trade for him this offseason. Nope, absolutely no need to do that. The Rangers have their first baseman of the future. They have their 3-hole hitter of the future, and the guy is absolutely electric this season. One of the things that frustrated me the most about him last year is that you could see when you look at his max exit velocity for the years past, which means the hardest he's hit a ball, it was always in the top 10% of the league. In 2021, it was top 9%. Year before, top 3%. And his rookie year, it was top 6% of the league. The guy can hit the ball, the absolute tarnation out of the baseball when he gets into it. But he kind of had that Nomar Mazara-ish complex where he had all the raw power in the world, but just very, very selective, almost to a fault. And last year, it resulted in a really great walk rate. And for most of his career, it'd been a really high walk rate last year. He walked 12.5% of his plate appearances, which is the top 10% of the league. But he just would not unload on baseballs like you would see him do every once in a while. This year, he got away from that. He started swinging more often, swinging at better pitches. He still walked at a decent clip, not an elite clip. He was in the 41st percentile in walk rate, which, is fine. Struck out a little bit more than last year, but the power numbers really speak for themselves. I mean, especially late in the season, from the month of June on, he just absolutely annihilated every single baseball. But you look at numbers like his average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, both of those near the top quarter of the league. Average exit velo just 2% below that, but the expected WOBA, expected batting average, and slugging percentage all in the top 20% of baseball. Barrel percentage in the 68th percentile, so close to being nice. so close to being nice. And, even that whiff rate, the K rate, the chase rate, all of those, while they're expanded, they're still right about average. So he did strike out a little bit more than he did last year, didn't walk quite as much, but he sacrificed it for power, and he absolutely got into it, blowing by his career high in home runs and just becoming an absolute masher. Only had 18 home runs last year and literally 3 fewer plate appearances, played the exact same number of games. But this year he blew past that with 9 more home runs. Even though he didn't walk quite as much, he still improved his on base by 1 single point because the batting average was so much better. He was putting balls in play more often. He was swinging at baseballs and he was just spraying them all over the field. You look at his hit chart and it is an absolute thing of beauty with hits to all fields. The power was a little bit more pull side than not, but he had his fair share of extra base hits to the opposite field, plenty of straight up center field home runs, and a couple of triples down that left field line. I'm not sure exactly what the second one is. It's hiding under all of these different singles because he was a singles machine, just like my dating life. Nathaniel Lowe had all the singles. Actually, no, the opposite of my dating life, because Nathaniel Lowe actually has all the singles. I just am all the singles. But anyway, this was a fantastic breakout season. This was something that the Rangers desperately needed with the new hitting staff of Donnie Ecker and Tim Hires. I feel like this is the thing that they can point to if the Rangers are thinking about replacing them next year, depending on who gets the managerial job. Be like, look what happened with Nathaniel Lowe. You see what he did last year? It's fine. But look what happened this year. He was one of the best hitters in baseball for the entire second half. And I think that is a huge part, obviously, due to Nathaniel Lowe's work. But I think the strategy and the things that those guys were employing and teaching him how to do, the Rangers offense was not really a problem this year. And Nathaniel Lowe is a big reason for that. He just absolutely took out his frustrations on these baseballs and sent them over the fences with regularity. Yeah, that's the phrase that I'm going to use. But I mean, he is the best Rangers first baseman since Mark Teixeira, and I don't think it's particularly close. He has the highest OPS for any Rangers first baseman since Teixeira left in 2007, the highest baseball reference WAR for any Rangers first baseman since 2007, and the highest batting average among any Rangers first baseman since Will Clark in 1998. Think about that. 1998. Some of you kids who are listening might not have even been born by then. I was only 4 years old that season. It's been a long time since a Ranger first baseman has done anything like this. Now, granted, I don't think he was quite the defender that Will Clark was or Mark Teixeira, but it does not matter. The guy absolutely mashed this year, and it is a hugely positive sign for the future. The Rangers don't have to look anywhere besides Nathaniel Lowe for their first baseman of the future. Coming up, we're going to look at some of the woes from the season, some things to improve on, and some overall takeaways. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline done as your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find, including that clunker of a Thursday night football game last night. You can bet on some of the better football games that are going on Sunday. And the Cowboys and the Eagles, a big game there. If you're feeling cocky about the Cowboys knocking off those undefeated Eagles, you can go take your bets there. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for sports wagering information, live betting, up to the minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest, easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, I think you know where I'm going with this, with the bad. Nathaniel Lowe was not good at defense this year. I talked about it a lot when he was struggling offensively. It was much more noticeable then. It's like, okay, well, if you got this guy who's offense only, then he's going to have to really freaking mash to make up for how bad he is defensively. And you know what? He did. He very much did. But that doesn't mean that he can't get better on offense. He finished the year in the second percentile of outs above average. Second. So not the worst. He was at the first percentile for the longest time. One of the worst defenders in baseball, and he knows it. He talked about it often. He's pretty frequent late on in the season. Like, yeah, I suck defensively. I need to get better at this, and I want to get better at this. And he has been working his tail off to get better. But defensively, it is just really incredibly rough for what he has done. This year he had 9 errors, probably should have been a lot more, which is fewer than the 11 errors that he had last year. A slightly higher fielding percentage, if that is your thing. Hold on, where we go. Yeah, 993 this year as opposed to 991 last year. I'm also saying that he had 1 inning at third base last year. I don't remember that, which I feel like I would have remembered that. Maybe it was like the one game that I didn't watch last year in that miserable 102 loss season. But he got better. His fielding percentage is right around league average for fielding percentage. His range was right around that. It's mainly just the scoops. It's mainly the scoops. The scoops are not great for Lowe. You know, there would be he would make some really good plays. He had his moments. It's not like every single play he made was just absolute dog dookie garbage. Like, there were some really, like, genuinely impressive plays that he made with his glove that made you think, okay, well, what about all these other plays? Like, these just mental mistakes of, like, you know, going for a ball when he probably should have let the second baseman go get it, because you have a former Gold Glover and Marcus Semien right over there at second base to go get some more of those plays. And, you know, a couple of bad throws on trying to go get a ball and then give it to the pitcher. Like, there was a lot of room for improvement there. And also in the first couple of months of the season, it was a rough April and May, more so May. The power numbers just really took a long time to get going for him. He only had 1 home run in April and March, and that was on the road trip to Oakland, where I remember very famously saying, oh yeah, no, nobody's going to get their first home run in this series in Oakland. Maybe Lowe and Semien at the time would get it when they came back home. Well, Semien didn't, and Lowe didn't get it when he came back home. He got it there. A absolutely massive shot in Oakland where he did really, really well in the Coliseum and really well against the A's all year. And he only had 2 home runs in the month of May, and May was by far his roughest month. He had just 2 other extra base hits besides those 2 homers. He had 1 double and 1 triple, but he hit 205 and on base of 260 and slugged just 321, a 582 OPS for that month. And that was the last time he'd have an OPS below 790 for a month. July was his one bad month in the final 4 months of the season. July, he had a 792 OPS. If you can say that's a bad month, that was better than he did for all of last year, and much better than he did in the first half, because once the calendar hit June, everything just clicked for Nathaniel Lowe, and he started absolutely crushing baseballs. I can't remember when those May home runs were. Maybe they were late in the month, and there was a different point I could have looked at to see when he actually fully embraced Nathaniel Lowe, big swinging man hitting bunch of dingers. But, you know, I already did like an hour and a half worth of prep for this episode, so we are going to go with his numbers in June. We're going to say June 1st is when everything changed, because I can't remember specifically. But he's a guy who hits the ball well, made great contact, uses all fields. I don't think that banning the shift is really going to have basically any impact on him, because of all the Rangers offensive players, the defenses against him are the most straight up. There were a couple of times this season where teams would shift against him, and you kind of look at it and think, what are you doing? Do you know who this is? Have you looked at his hit chart? Do you have any kind of scouting report on this guy? This guy uses all fields. There are a lot of left-handed, just very pull-heavy guys. I mean, we've seen Seager do it. We see with Joey Gallo was here. We've seen with just a lot of left-handed players in general, but Nathaniel Lowe is not one of those guys. He is a guy who uses all fields. That's why he hit 302 for the season, and why he absolutely dominated in the second half. Coming up, we're going to get into what that second half looked like, what kind of change made all this difference possible, and some expectations for the future. But first, let's word from our sponsors. Now, let's look at some of these second half numbers. He had the highest second half batting average since Josh Hamilton in 2010 when he hit 384. 384. I don't think Lowe is going to do that for a first half or a second half, but hitting 339 in 72 games and over 300 plate appearances, that's pretty darn special. And that's what he did for the second half. That's not even including his massive month of June, which honestly was one of his better months. Obviously, August was his best month, but in June and August, both those months, he hit 7 home runs in each of them, had a 910 OPS in June. But looking at those numbers from June 1st, that's 114 games, 474 plate appearances, and 435 at-bats. He had 138 hits, 35 walks, 24 homers, 21 doubles, 2 triples, and a slash line of 317, 373, 540. That is a 913 OPS. That is offensive juggernaut level numbers, and not a small sample size either. That's more than half the season. That's almost 3/4 of the season where he was just absolutely on fire. Things kind of slowed down for him in the late months, but even in the last, September and October, he had 33 games under his belt there. Still hit 306 for that month, a 382 on base, and slugged, just 471 with 5 home runs. But he had 5 or more home runs in every month from June through the end of the season if you're combining September and October, which I am because Baseball Reference told me I could do so I did it. But I want to look back at that month of August where everything, we could already tell that he was on a bender, 2-month bender. He comes through in June and just lights the world on fire. July is still pretty solid, but not the crazy high level that it was in June. But then August comes out and you're like, all right, is this sustained success really going to keep on going? And he just takes it to an entirely new level. He hit 389 that month with an on base of 450 for an entire month, 28 games, 120 plate appearances, 7 home runs in that month, 5 doubles, a triple, 10 walks to 21 strikeouts, and an OPS of 1098. That is nearly, let's say, 13 points shy of what Aaron Judge did for the entire season, which, again, just freaking bonkers. But this was offensive excellence for Nathaniel Lowe in a time where there wasn't a whole lot else going on the offense. Like, the Rangers needed every single one of those runs. They were kind of out of it at that point. And in June, the Rangers got, if Corey Seager didn't have a slump in the month of June, not to pile on Corey Seager, but if he didn't have a slump in the month of June, literally the other 3 huge Rangers hitters were all crushing it in that month. And Semien and Lowe and Garcia, if they had Seager going, then maybe things would have turned around and maybe the entire season would look different and they wouldn't drop as many of those winnable games in June. But that's a whole different story. But that month of August, where he won, I think it was 5 home runs in 1 week, maybe it's just 4. But still, and he won American League Player of the Week, and he maybe could have won American League Player of the Month because of just the offensive brilliance that he showed there. But man, if you can get some more extended runs like that from Nathaniel Lowe, you see why they made the trade. You see why the Rangers thought, okay, well, if the Rays are just going to give this guy up, they gave up a couple of decent prospects in Slavis Basabe, Heriberto Hernandez, Alexander Ovalis. They're fine prospects. They were really, really low lottery tickets, which, again, my frustration at the time, I'm very wrong on this in hindsight, but I thought, well, why are you trading for like a minimal upgrade at a position where you had Ronald Guzman, who was fine. He was fine at the time. And you're trading these young guys when you're just now entering a rebuild. Well, this is why. This is one of those trades. This is what they were hoping for from a Nick Solak. They did not win that trade with the Rays. Pete Fairbanks was the much better player, as we are seeing. But Nathaniel Lowe, the Rangers seem to have gotten the better of that deal. And maybe Basabe and Hernandez and Ovalis turn out to be half decent players, but the Rays would absolutely undo that trade in a heartbeat if they could, because their offense could really have used a guy like Nathaniel Lowe this year. They just did not have it offensively, and he was the engine that powered the Rangers, the most consistent offensive player. Some of the highs were a little bit higher at times from guys like Semien and Seager, but like Nathaniel Lowe's hot streaks, they lasted a long time. And that's one of the things that was talked about when the Rangers traded for him, is like, this guy, I mean, Solak talked about it when Lowe came here. Is like, there were like months at a time where like, this is the best hitter I've seen like ever, and that is a really, really high compliment from a guy who was in such a deep and talented farm system like Tampa Bay. But like, this guy, the offensive hot streaks are so prolonged. The slumps were not very prolonged. Even in that month of April, when he wasn't hitting the ball over the fence, he was still making a lot of contact. He was still had a 313 batting average and a 368 on base in that first month. He only had the one home run, and the ball was very, very dead back then. But still, he was getting on base at a pretty darn decent clip, and the Rangers have their 1, 2, 3 hitters for the foreseeable future. Because even if you look at the free agent this year, I mean, there are 2 players that might upgrade and kick out one of those 1, 2, or 3 hitters in Semien, Seager, and Lowe, and that's, well, Aaron Judge and Nolan Arenado. And I don't think the Rangers are going to go get either of those guys. I don't even think they're going to go get Trey Turner, who would be the 3rd best hitter on the market. But that is a huge, huge thing for a team that is going all in, needing to make the playoffs next year, and this drought. Don't make it last, what would it be, 7 seasons at that point? Having a guy like Lowe make this breakout is just absolutely ginormous. It's just like the breakout last year from Adolis Garcia. I mean, the back half kind of marred that a little bit, and this year kind of changed the minds. Like, all right, this is a 3.5 win player. This is a guy who can provide a lot of thump and a lot of energy on this team. And Lowe is the biggest breakout offensive star that the Rangers have had in a long, long time. And not just, I mean, Adolis is fine and had a solid season, but the overall offensive impact is obviously a lot higher with Lowe. I think the raw power is right on there. I mean, they both had the exact same number of home runs this year at 27, but Lowe is getting a lot more of those singles, a lot more walks, a little bit more patient and hitting the ball, to all fields, which Adolis doesn't do quite as much. Still provides a lot of value, but Lowe was just so valuable offensively, taking that jump that it can allow the Rangers to go and spend a lot of money this offseason on their starting pitching. Go get Martin Perez, and then throw a crap ton of cash at choose 1 to 2 starting pitchers on this free agent market, because there are a whole lot to choose from, and that is absolutely ginormous. It kind of the trade for Lowe in hindsight kind of gives me a little bit similar feelings to the Josh Hamilton and Nelson Cruz trades, in that it's kind of buying low on a player. I mean, I can't remember exactly what the give back in those other trades were, but I mean, this feels like buying even lower on a guy and not giving up a decent amount, because if I remember correctly, there were major league like capable players that were being sent back for Hamilton and Cruz, and both those guys were at other places and for various reasons had shown some promise as prospects, but hadn't quite gotten the opportunity or taken advantage of the opportunity to be the breakout star. The Rangers are like, all right, well, we can tweak, we can fix this person, we can give them the opportunity, and they can absolutely explode onto the scene. And that is what Nathaniel Lowe has done. And even with his setbacks and me groaning about every little scoop that he doesn't make or every little defensive goof up, the offense will make you forget about that 10 times out of 10. I mean, the Rangers aren't having to go look for another first baseman. There aren't a whole lot of first basemen that are better than him. I mean, like I said, not having to go out and trade a crap ton of prospect capital to go get Matt Olson and have pretty much the same production for Nathaniel Lowe at 5% of the prospect price. I mean, there's some thought about trading for Josh Bell at the deadline. The Padres ended up getting him, and he really fell off in the second half while Nathaniel Lowe ascended to new heights. But I mean, having him have similar offensive output to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, he had a higher Fangraphs WAR than Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the guy who finished second MVP voting last year. Granted, it was a big step back offensively for Guerrero, but like, that is a huge compliment to Nathaniel Lowe, and a kind of star that the Rangers have not really developed in years past, or been able to make that little trade of like, all right, we're going to go get this young guy who we think that we can, unlock the offensive potential in him that this other team has squandered. And props to them for recognizing that. Props to John Daniels and Chris Young for seeing that, and for the coaching staff and for Lowe to get the most out of him and make him this player. And by the way, he's here for a long time. He is not even arbitration eligible until 2024. He is under contract through the 2026 season, which will be his age 30 season. The Rangers got prime value out of this. He didn't even make $1 million this year. Not even $1 million. Like 780,000, I believe, was what he made this year. Let's see. No, excuse me. Not even 780. $716,000 for this guy who was top 10 in OPS in the American League and one of the better first basemen in baseball, at least in the top third. You got to at least say he is in the top third. I wouldn't quite put him in the top five. I'd still probably take Freddie Freeman, Paul Goldschmidt, Pete Alonso, maybe Vladdy Jr. and Jose Abreu. I think for the long term, I'd definitely take Vladdy Jr. But like, this is a huge win for the Rangers. They can go focus their offseason efforts and budget on the pressing need of several starting pitchers. And if they do get another bat, which they could go get a left fielder, or they could go get a Joey Gallo, or they could go get a, maybe they could go spend some money on a Will Myers if they were so inclined. Actually, yeah, they could if they were so inclined, or, someone else in left field, but they don't have to. And I think that is the biggest net positive from this Nathaniel Lowe season. As for next year, just the goals are don't be in the bottom 5% of defenders next year. Just don't be awful defensively. I think that is a fair goal to have for him. And offensively, if he can take a step further, if he can have, a few more months with an OPS over 900, or finish the season with an OPS on over 900, that would be absolutely fantastic. I mean, if he could, the goal is eventually he's a guy who could have a 3-4-5 season, which for me is kind of a gold standard for what makes a elite, top of the scale offensive player, which is what you'd think you would get from Corey Seager. Maybe we'll get that next year, but 3-4-5 means hitting 300, on base 400, slugging 500. The Rangers haven't had anybody do that in a long time. The last guy that the Rangers had that did it was Josh Hamilton in 2010, but some of the guys who didn't do it at all. I mean, Mark Teixeira never did it with the Rangers. I mean, Adrian Beltre never did it with the Rangers. It has been a long time. And outside of Josh Hamilton, I think it was just Juan Gonzalez that had a 3-4-5 season for the Rangers. So that would be a holy grail level of offensive player. And if the Rangers somehow next year, Lowe does that, he can get the walk rate back up a little bit. Doesn't have to quite be at that, top 10% of the league, but just make it go up just a little bit. He did improve a whole lot on hitting fastballs this year, still absolutely destroyed sliders. But if he can continue to walk more at a little bit higher rate and still not sacrifice the power while doing that, man, that is going to be one of the best hitters in the entire league, which, by the way, he already is. that's going to do it for this week's editions of Locked On Rangers. Next week, I'll probably take a little bit of a look at the managerial search, what the Rangers are looking for there, as well as a few more player breakdowns. But for your next listen, go check out Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully. He gives you his unique perspective on the major leagues, past, present, including playoff baseball, with our guest stars from around the Locked On MLB network. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.